2, 3.
This is Müslüm Gürses. Born in 1953 to a poor family in southeastern Turkey, he first started singing in and around the cotton fields of Adana. He then began performing professionally in local tea gardens, then moving on to local radio, finally ending up in TRT, performing türküs, or folk songs. Media was heavily controlled at the time, and TRT, the state broadcasting company, only allowed either Turkish art music, a la Kimseye Etmem Şikayet, or Turkish folk music, a la Uzun İnce Bir Yoldayım. Throughout the early period of Müslüm Gürses's career in the late 60s and 70s, he made his name as an excellent performer of these türküs. Then the 80s hit.
Ve gittikçe etkisi azaltılmaya çalışılan Atatürk ilkelerine yeniden güç ve işlevlik kazandırmak, kendi kendini kontrol edemeyen demokrasiyi sağlam temeller üzerine oturtmak, kaybolan devlet otoritesini yeniden tesis etmek için yönetime el koymak zorunda kalmıştır.
Turkey underwent a massive identity shift in the 1980s because of this very moment. The military took over control of the state in an all-encompassing coup d'etat on September 12, 1980, supposedly to curb the honestly excessive urban warfare going on between the communists and the nationalists. The September 12 coup also exerted heavy influence on what was allowed on the artistic sphere. Many musicians with well-known political leanings were banned, filmmakers were censored, and books were burned. This created a cultural vacuum, and in this vacuum, a new movement emerged with Müslüm Gürses more or less at the center of it.
Sevginin sahtesine, hayatın cilvesine, talihin böylesine, itirazım var.
Gürses, alongside with Orhan Gencebay and Ferdi Tayfur, came to be associated with the arabesque movement, performed and appreciated mostly by the Eastern and southeastern domestic immigrants who grew up listening to Arabic language radio due to the proximity of Eastern Turkey to Iraq and Syria. Arabesque became the defining cultural movement of Turkey in the 1980s. Because he was speaking mostly to the socio-economic hardships Eastern Turkish people suffer through in Western Turkey, arabesque, and by extension Müslüm Gürses, found a fervent audience. For the longest time, this was the image most people associated with Müslüm Gürses. He was Müslüm Baba, or Father Müslüm, to the disenfranchised, the misfit, the social pariah. His concerts were often home to scenes of absolute bedlam and even ritual self-harm. If you've asked somebody to describe a Müslüm Gürses concert in the 80s and even in the 90s, they wouldn't be able to without using the word jilet, which means razor in Turkish. Then, with the turn of the new century, Müslüm Gürses decided to go in a different direction. This is Paramparça. Originally composed and performed by influential Turkish rock icon Teoman, Paramparça was covered by Müslüm Gürses with a distinctly arabesque style in 2002. Gürses followed Paramparça with a cover of İkimizin Yerine, originally performed by Tarkan. And these covers brought Gürses a new and younger audience, only vaguely aware of his association with his hardcore arabesque days. Most artists would be content with this little deviation and do what Gürses did until 2006, which is to add a few pop covers to his repertoire, but keeping it mainly within the confines of the safe zone that made him a national icon. I'm sure, though, that almost nobody would do what Gürses did in 2006. Gürses signed with Passage Music, a label mostly associated with urban and alternative music. In preparation for his first Passage Music record, he teamed up with the famous author and poet Murat Mungan. Mungan supervised this first Passage Music album, picking the songs to be covered by Gürses, writing lyrics and curating other literary figures to come and contribute to the album. This project, which took around 2 years to complete, was finally released on April 18, 2006 under the full name Müslüm Gürses with Orhan Mungan selection Aşk Tesadüfleri Sever. Aşk Tesadüfleri Sever was a culture shock. Here was Müslüm Gürses, his raspy vocals and his tragic persona still visible. Yet the songs that were covered came from incredibly varied sources. There was a Garbage cover, a Bowie cover, a Dylan one, Rainbow and Björk and Serge Gainsbourg. And what was even more incredible was the fact that Mungan, the supervisor and perhaps the main creative force behind this album, was, and still is, openly gay. So this was a gamble, because Gürses was always associated with the eastern side of Turkey. Even when he was selling out massive venues in Western Turkey, his audience mostly consisted of Eastern Turkish domestic immigrants with Eastern Turkish values. And Eastern Turkish values are decidedly more conservative than the West. So Gürses, by extension, had always spoken to a conservative Eastern audience. Now, here he was, covering Western songs and working with an openly homosexual poet. He could have lost his fan base without getting acceptance from a new audience. He could have lost it all. In the end, he lost nothing. Aşk Tesadüfleri Sever was a massive success and gave Gürses some of the biggest and most memorable hits of his long career. And this reinvention caused Gürses to be re-evaluated by the Turkish intelligentsia. Where once stood didactic cultural disdain, there was now an understanding. His older fans still connected to his raw emotional artistry, but only now there were newer, younger fans who embraced this more poetic direction alongside Western arrangements that they already knew and loved. And everyone, from all walks of life, for once in their lifetimes, agreed on one thing. Once Müslüm Gürses started to sing, you believed everything he claimed to be feeling. Gürses then followed up Aşk Tesadüfleri Sever with 2 more Passage Music albums, both memorable, not as iconic as the original. He then passed away in 2013 as an immovable cultural monument that people of all sects responded to. His life, filled with unbelievable tragedy, was turned into a movie, and his songs are still popular on streaming platforms. Had he not taken that gamble in 2006, perhaps he would have slowly faded out of public consciousness like his arabesque comrade Ferdi Tayfur, but he didn't. He chose adventure over safety, and on top of this choice, he is still here. Because as Mungan wrote and Gürses sang over the backdrop of Björk's beautiful Bachelorette, should you wish to start a new life, leave your shadow behind as a spare. Life likes repetition, to start anew. Birds like branches, and wings like the fly. See you next time.
Başlamak istersen yeni bir hayata, gel yeni yedek bırak ardında, hayat tekrar